real trucking accidents.
Learn the rules of the road if you've been involved in a trucking accident.
Call, text, email, then join me along with the experts from Hollis, Wright, and Couch Sunday after the news at 10.
Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by Hollis, Wright, and Couch, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the Hollis, Wright, and Couch Law Firm and host David Lamb.
Hello and welcome into the attorneys. Appreciate you spending your Sunday evening with us for the next half hour. We're going to talk about trucking companies and accidents. We trust them to carry cargo from sea to shining sea. We're going to talk tonight about how they rule the roadways and what rights and responsibilities they have as well as we have. Our conversation is going to be spearheaded by Josh Wright of the firm of Hollis, Wright, and Couch. Josh, good to see you.
As always, great to see you too. You know, this is a great topic. We've done a similar topic to it before based on some of the federal regulations. You know, there's some real interesting statistics nationally when you're talking about trucking accidents. About 500,000 different accidents happen per year. Wow. Roughly 5,000 of those involve fatality. So at the end of the day, this is pretty prevalent on our roads. It affects us here in the viewing audience area of NBC, sure. As well as just the state of Alabama. So it's a real relevant topic. We're going to be talking about regulations, and also talking about what to do if you've been involved in an accident involving a trucking company. One of the experts we have at our law firm that does a lot of this stuff is Tyler Vail. As always, we'll bring Tyler on for things like this, and we appreciate you being here. He's going to be able to answer some good questions for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, good deal. Good to see you, Tyler.
Thank you,
Let's jump into it. What laws govern a trucking companies and a trucker's conduct? They have laws for such?
Oh, absolutely. They not only do they have the laws that we as individuals who are driving cars on the roads every day have to adhere to the Alabama rules of the road. Right. They have a heightened standard. They have additional regulations. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration sets forth some regulations they have to do. Even the Alabama Public Service Commission sets forth some guidelines they have to follow. And so, right, it's not only the rules that you and I are familiar with, it is about 4 or 5 other sets of regulations that they have to follow.
And these are all regulations that are mandated. They're not potentials or desired. They are mandated for things that have to a trucking company and the drivers have to comply with in order to operate on the roads on a daily basis on our interstates and our highways. You know, and David, it's always important to note whenever we're doing a show like this, there are plenty of trucking companies and truckers doing it the right way.
Doing well.
The ones that at our firm we put all our force and power behind is those that are cutting corners and those that are weighing profit over safety. Keeping drivers on the road that aren't supposed to be on the road and putting drivers on the road that should have never been on the road in the first place. Exactly. And so we're going to really be talking about and zeroing in on those folks doing it the wrong way.
Yeah, good point.
And there are some of those companies just doing it well, and some of the best drivers out there are guys who for years have a spotless track record of.
And they're on the road a lot more than us.
They sure are.
They've got to be expert drivers and professionals in what they do.
Yeah, so hats off to them for sure. A question here: how long do I have to file a lawsuit if I'm hurt in a trucking accident?
Generally, the law is 2 years. It's typical and similar to an automobile accident where you've got 2 years from the date of your accident in order to file your lawsuit. There are some exceptions with any statute of limitation, but for the most part, 2 years is the answer to that.
That's exactly right. And you know, most of the time when folks are in an accident, they know it, and we usually hear from them within the first 30 to 60 days during an automobile accident. Mm-hmm. I think where the 2 years comes into play on these type of accidents is because the injuries on these accidents can be horrendous. Some folks can be in the hospital for up to a year and then treat after that. So they're really not even thinking yet about a potential lawsuit until maybe that 2 years has already run. And so one of the most important things about this area of practice that we do is to get early information from clients. And maybe it's a family member. Maybe the individual can't talk about it. They're either dead or they're severely injured in a hospital. A family member needs to contact us so we can kind of begin the process, because 2 years can go by quickly.
And David, one of the sad things related to trucking cases that we see is because of the weight of the vehicles, you could have a 40 to 80,000 pound vehicle versus a 3 to 4,000 pound car. Mm-hmm. Because of the weight, the amount of hours that trucks and tractor trailers are on the roads in Alabama. Braking distances are different because they're heavier vehicles than smaller vehicles. Because of all of those factors, among many others, these accidents oftentimes are catastrophic, and they involve, unfortunately, catastrophic injuries and very significant injuries. If you've been hit by a truck and you didn't have catastrophic injuries, you're one of the lucky ones, because oftentimes the rule is that you're going to have catastrophic injury or death related to these accidents.
For all the reasons you just cited, I've got to ask about insurance. Are the insurance requirements different for trucking companies and those who?
They are. We've done a show fairly recently, you may remember, on the automobile laws that have changed over the last several years, where those that operate regular automobiles on our roads are now mandated to have insurance. And in fact, there's some new rules coming into place that you can't renew your license if you don't have proof of insurance. Trucking companies operate totally separately. They're governed through federal regulations. They are mandated to have roughly anywhere from $750,000 of insurance to $5 million of insurance for liability. The range there is depending on what you're carrying, from common property to carrying individuals that are in a bus, if you will, or if you're a common carrier carrying individuals from point A to point B, you may have to have more insurance. Or if you're carrying certain types of hazardous cargo, you may have to have more insurance than the $750,000. But it is governed by federal regulation. Absolutely. And it's mandated and required. In all my years in handling trucking cases, I've only seen one trucking company that was on the road that did not have insurance. Wow. So for the most part, you're going to find insurance is involved in every one of these cases.
Yeah. Examples recently that led our newscast in the last few years have been the trucking accidents that cause property damage to interstates. You know, if you all remember the ones, you know, here locally, responsible for that as well, because in one instance, quite a bit of damage was done to the interstate system right downtown.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple years ago, it seemed like about every other weekend there was a truck running into some type of overpass and causing severe damage and shutting down parts of, you know, Interstate 65, one of the busiest interstates in the country.
There wasn't a steel coil that went through downtown Birmingham without falling off a truck. It felt like for about a 3-year period.
Yeah, you know, it just seemed there was just one thing after another. You're right, and I believe the state actually did go after the trucking company to pay for all those property damage. That's right, 'cause that's extensive. I mean, they had to get this thing done in no time and spent no telling how many millions of dollars to get this done, you know. And so, yeah, the state certainly can go after individuals.
Generally, the insurance policies that we have just talked about will impact property damage as well as liability or injury, personal injury caused through an accident.
In terms of getting legal counsel in a case like this, whenever there is an accident involving a truck, does it up the importance and the value of getting counsel quickly?
Answer is yes. I'll let Tyler jump on that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what folks need to understand, and we touched on a little bit of it earlier, is that these accidents usually involve catastrophic injuries or deaths, and the insurance companies who insure these trucks know that, you know, and so they have these immediate response teams that come out that are specifically to investigate these 18-wheeler or big truck accidents. And so they're on the scene literally maybe within minutes or a couple hours. And they're there to, you know, inspect the truck, do all these inspections and do all these things that the individual who may be injured, being life-flighted to a hospital, has no idea is taking place. Right. And so you're right. So you don't want to give them a 6-month head start, you know, to correct things or to go through their logs and determine everything was entered just right, or to work on those brakes that may not have been functioning properly at the time. So yeah, time is of the essence. I'd say in this type case more than any other case. We have, you know, experts that we use all the time that can be on the scene very quickly. If a truck is impounded, we can have folks there inspecting it. We can get it all done at the same time. And so we get true evidence at the time of the accident.
And Tyler's exactly right. Really, you know, the most important thing that I think he just talked about was these immediate response teams. Trucking companies have got them where they will have people on the ground, local to the accident, taking pictures, statementizing witnesses, talking with police officers, persuading maybe witnesses and others as to maybe what they saw as opposed to the reality. Again, we're not talking all trucking companies do that, but immediate response teams sometimes on the ground have a natural inclination to try and push liability away from the trucking company. That's a fact. I've seen it in my practice. there is a whole host of things that these trucking companies do with these immediate response teams. To level the playing field, to protect the injured victim, they need to retain counsel too. And we often say, you don't have to just come to our law firm. There are other law firms out there that do this stuff, but come to somebody. And what you want is you want somebody on the ground too doing the exact same things immediately, so that you have the ability to statementize witnesses and download black box information related to the tractor trailer and talk with the police officer and gather the forensics that are necessary to establish the case. And David, one of the things that we sometimes talk about on the show, but we probably don't talk about it enough, on the plaintiff side for that injured victim, these cases are taken almost exclusively on contingency, which means that the typical person that's injured may say to themselves, well, I can't afford to have a law firm represent me in these cases because I just can't afford it.
Yeah.
The plaintiff firms handle these cases for free on a contingency until such time as there is a recovery, if there is a recovery. So it doesn't cost the victim anything to have it investigated.
All right, that'll be our first breaking point, our first break of the attorneys, but a couple more to go as we head to break. Reminders of how you can get in touch with our panel of experts. Call, text, email, find them on Facebook as well as Twitter. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch, and thank you for watching The Attorneys on Alabama's 13. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never need legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of this show is simple. Provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Now, your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to this show or related to other civil legal matters, call, email, or text us to talk with one of our lawyers. You can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter to learn about important legal news that could affect you or your family. Or simply contact us by going to alabamas13.com and click on the attorneys link. Now, we know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and for watching The Attorneys here on Alabama's 13.
Welcome back into the attorneys. A couple of more segments and opportunities for you to get in touch with our panel of experts. So go ahead and get your questions into us. You can call, text, email that info on the screen throughout the remainder of the show. We've talked a lot about the responsibilities of the companies and accidents happening in terms of what they're carrying. But what about the responsibility of a trucking company, specifically pertaining to the driver?
Yeah, you know, the driver has got certain responsibilities that he has to follow in order to maintain his responsibilities under the federal standards. Generally, a trucking company is responsible for the actions of its driver, David. There are some exceptions to that, but they're generally responsible for the actions of the driver. If the driver is operating within what's called the line and scope of his authority, hauling freight for them or coming back from dropping off a load, they would be responsible. The company would be for his actions. But let's take let's kind of unwrap this a little bit. Let's take some of the responsibilities of a driver. Number one, driver has a responsibility to maintain logbooks. Logbooks as to the time he comes on service and the time he goes off service during a typical day.
Okay.
And there are certain very specific restrictions. The federal regulations really evaluate and I think do a pretty good job of assessing when these accidents are more likely to happen. And I think one of the statistics you'll hear today, if we haven't already talked about it, is 30% of all accidents involving tractor trailers involve fatigue. So one of the most important things that the federal standards do is they ensure that they create and promulgate regulations to prevent drivers from driving too much. Let's just talk about it for a minute. A driver who has had 10 consecutive hours off, so he's slept somewhere, probably eaten, he's supposed to be fresh, can drive for 11 hours straight,
Okay.
then has to take 10 hours off. If he has driven for 11 hours, he can no longer drive during that day. There are a couple of little nuances to that rule. One is if a driver has been on duty for 14 hours, even if he's only driven 5 hours that day, but he's been on duty, loading, unloading, doing other things in the office, he is incapable of driving after the 14th hour on duty. So the federal regulations are here to protect folks like us driving on the road and other individuals that are out on the road to try and prevent drivers from being fatigued. There are also some more complicated rules about how many hours somebody can drive if you're driving a tractor trailer or another commercial vehicle in a typical 7-day period and in an 8-day period. We don't need to get into all those. The point is this: the rules are complicated. If you have an issue, if you've had an accident, if you've been involved in a circumstance with a commercial motor vehicle where you were injured, you need to get to somebody who can evaluate these cases and can go through the logbooks and do an audit and determine, number one, is the logbook accurate? Has the person been honest? And are they complying with the federal regulations? And that can be done through an audit through experts that we use and retain on a daily basis.
Yeah. And what Josh just said is exactly right. And it just kind of goes into the complexity. You can see how difficult some of these situations are. And if you're speaking with attorneys and interviewing, if they cannot really state to you what Josh has just stated about the hours on, the hours off, the time in a week, the logbooks, you probably need to get another opinion. I mean, this stuff, that can make or break your case. And in the majority of cases I have found, that is one of the most crucial elements of the case in proving that the driver was driving outside the guidelines. Because their logs are handwritten, they may say one thing, but now with all the technology and the GPS technology, you can track from one point to one point at so many miles per hour. You can tell if they're fudging a little bit to make sure they can get that extra, 300 miles in or something like that. And so to be able to decipher what you see and take all the information together and determine if they're within regulations or not, it's scientific. It really is. It's a lot more complicated. And if somebody can't explain those things to you and go through it like Josh just told you, you probably need to speak to someone else.
And think about it for a second. Why is this even important? I'll tell you why. Drivers generally are paid on the amount of hours they operate, or maybe better stated, the amount of miles they have driven.
Okay.
So if a driver has the capability to increase the number of miles that he has driven in a typical week, he has the capability to make more money. It's also dependent on whether he is what's called an owner-operator, if you will, an independent contractor working for a company, or if he's a company driver. That can be very complex. And again, I always like to add this caveat for those truck drivers out there watching the show. We're not saying everybody's doing this, but the number of times that our law firm has seen drivers that have had more than one set of logbooks, one that is handed off after accidents or handed off when they go through security checkpoints, and then another logbook that is used for purposes of the amount of money that is made, it would scare you a little bit. And so these audits can be done by good experts that can evaluate exactly like Tyler talked about, point A to point B over the last 6 months. How long does it take that person to run that same run? Because these guys generally, and women, run the same runs.
Right.
Not all drivers do, but generally they'll run the same runs. So you can evaluate the timing of those runs, and you can really do an audit to determine whether or not they've been driving too much. If they shouldn't have ever been on the road, David, then the accident would have never happened.
Yeah.
That's right.
If there is that inducement to get paid based on the number of miles you cover, then is that not kind of contributing to the problem here?
Could be.
Is there not a better way to do that? Maybe that's a little more safety minded?
Yeah, I think with the onset of satellite tracking and GPS, that ultimately will eliminate a lot of the logbook infractions and problems. And again, there are drivers all day long doing it exactly the right way because they're honest and ethical in doing it right. And sometimes it's not even these drivers' problem. It's really the trucking companies that are pushing them to do things they shouldn't do. I mean, a whole nother show we could do on trucking companies that are putting vehicles on the road that are unsafe. That's not the driver's responsibility and problem. It is the trucking company's responsibility to make sure that the vehicles are safe, that they operate, that are contributing to accidents.
You guys know we have NASCAR fans watching, right?
Yeah.
When we come back from this break, we've got a speed question. about the speed of those trucks. We'll get to that when we come back. A reminder, call, text, email, get your questions into us. Also, if you'll search the term Hollis, Wright, and Couch, you'll find them on Facebook and Hollis_Wright to locate them on Twitter. Stay tuned. The final segment of The Attorney is coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis, Wright, and Couch. And if you've ever served on a jury, you may have wondered why there are gaps in the evidence that you're given. In tonight's Legal 4-in-1, we're answering the question, is there insurance to pay that verdict or not? Know this, just because the lawyers never mention insurance in the trial doesn't mean that there's not insurance to pay a verdict in the case. Now, Rule 411 of the Alabama Rules of Evidence states the following. Evidence that a person was or was not insured against liability is generally not admissible or allowed to be discussed at trial in front of the jury. Now, the reason for that is that a jury could award more money in a case if they knew on the front end that the defendants had insurance to pay for it. But the reality in our state is this. In almost all lawsuits that get to trial, insurance is there to pay judgments awarded by the jury. For example, all automobiles in Alabama are required to have liability insurance. Coverage can range from $25,000 up to $1 million in those cases, and in theory, all car crash cases that get to trial should have insurance available to pay any verdict awarded by the jury. Trucks have to carry more than $750,000 to up to $5 million worth of insurance. Unfortunately, you'll never hear that during trial. Even in medical malpractice cases, the doctor has liability insurance to help pay a judgment. Now that's something you won't hear during trial because the rules don't allow such testimony. Yet almost all judgments against a doctor involve liability insurance. Please remember your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis, Wright, and Couch want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to each and every question that you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you, and thanks as always for watching The Attorneys right here on Alabama's 13.
Welcome back into our final segment of The Attorneys, talking about trucking companies and cases involving them. We're kind of in the shadow of Talladega, so not surprised that there's a question here about speed. Sometimes interstates, it does feel like you're in a NASCAR race with the interstates around here. But pertaining to trucking companies, are there governors, are there any sort of limits and regulations in terms of speed?
You know, sometimes. Some trucks have them, you know, some don't. A lot of times, what we have to do is kind of go back. I touched on this a little earlier, and so Josh, we have to kind of go back through the logbooks and determine, you know, when they started a trip, when they arrived, how many miles, how fast are you going. You can do the math. You can determine how fast a truck was going. You know, and just my personal experience on the road, I'd say that more don't have them than do, because I know the speeds that I'm sometimes getting passed by these big trucks on the interstate. You know, if I'm going 70 miles an hour and they're going by me, obviously I think that's a problem.
So there's no general rule for everyone. But some companies kind of specifically do that themselves.
At this point, there does not appear to be any federal regulations or any public service regulations or local regulations that mandate a governor. And again, what we're talking about with a governor, for those that don't understand that term as it relates to trucking companies, is a limit as to how fast a vehicle will actually operate. No different than when we drive a golf cart. There's generally a governor in there that will regulate your speed, not allow you to go too fast. It's a similar concept. And so we see cases all the time where somebody argues there's a governor, but sometimes the governors are not working. So doing a logbook and a space and distance or a time and distance analysis with an expert will help assess whether or not there in fact is a governor that's working.
Okay. What about the fitness of the driver? Does that come into play here in terms of medical history or even literally the physical fitness of the driver to drive for such long hours?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we both can attack it. Let me just say this. one of the things that we talked about early on is these tractor trailer drivers are professionals, and they have heightened duties and responsibilities that they've got to take care of before they can even operate a vehicle. One of which happens to be that they have to prove, unlike me and you driving on the road, where we don't have to have yearly physicals, they have to have yearly physicals where they prove and establish that in fact they are fit to be able to operate a commercial motor vehicle on our roads. And that requires them to go to a physical on a yearly basis. There are a couple exceptions to the yearly basis, but for the most part it's a yearly basis. And they have to establish through a medical provider, a physician, that they're in fact fit for duty. If they're not allowed to operate that commercial motor vehicle.
That's right. That's exactly right. And not only fit physically or mentally, but also have to pass drug tests, on a regular basis. Even if there's an accident, they're supposed to have a drug test done post-accident right then to determine if maybe they were under any type of influence at the time of the accident. Because unfortunately, and I know Josh can attest to this, a large percentage of these accidents involve drivers who are on some type of, stimulant, drug, or alcohol, and it's a sad state to think that, again, this is a very small number, but that's usually what we're dealing with, is accidents and bad injuries, is that these folks are driving on these roads, on the highways with us, maybe under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and a lot of that may be because they're trying to get more hours out of a day and they're driving past their allotted 11 hours. And so it just kind of all comes together where you have to really dissect each one of these things, the fitness of the driver, his logbooks, his history, his driving history. Maybe he is very healthy. Maybe he's had no problems with drugs. But prior to working for this company, he's had, 6 accidents and 11 speeding tickets in 4 different states, and all these other problems. That driver is probably prone to go a little faster than he should, and that may cause an accident. So there's all kinds of things that a professional driver, first that they must do, to qualify, but also that a company should do before they hire someone. Right. And all those issues come into play in these cases.
The NTSB did a study not so long ago, 6-7 years ago, that tracked 168 accidents across the United States during a definitive period of time. They determined in that 1/3 of those individuals had alcohol or a stimulant medication in their system. 2/3 of them had other drugs involved in their system. And so that will tell you the amount of drugs and alcohol circumstances that we see on these accidents.
Yeah, about a minute and a half remaining, but time enough for a final thought. Tyler, you first.
Absolutely. These are horrible events, and if anyone is involved in something like this or a family member, it is tragic and it is usually devastating. But we've touched on this. The most important thing is to act quickly. I cannot emphasize that enough. You really need somebody on your side as soon as you can get them.
Yeah. Josh?
Yeah, I'd just say I think the rule is that commercial transportation drivers are professionals. They're doing it the right way, and they're operating safely on our interstates and on our highways. But there are some folks that are pushing the bounds and doing it the wrong way. And for those are the folks that our law firm goes after and helps victims. Remember that there are firms out there, whoever you go to, go early. Get it evaluated, but remember that there are firms out there that will handle these cases on a contingency fee basis where you don't pay anything for the investigation and the evaluation done by the firm to protect you.
Some great advice tonight, Josh and Tyler. Good to see you guys. Good to see you as well. I appreciate your time. As we wrap things up, well, you can still get in touch with the firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch. A reminder, you can call, text, email, also find them on Facebook and Twitter. We appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch.